Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Wednesday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. Before we get into the subject of girl bosses today, I want to prove to you the lack of sophistication in entertainment discourse on social media. So here's an article from The Hollywood Reporter that I responded to. Now it's about Francis Ford Coppola's big epic movie that he's trying to sell to movie studios, Megalopolis. I'm very, very interested and excited about this movie. This is what The Hollywood Reporter had to say about it. Francis Ford Coppola's self-funded epic Megalopolis is deemed too experimental. Right, that really triggered me, because in the good old days, people took risks on movies, and today they don't. They fund bad movies that are supposed to be sure things that actually don't make any money, and not good enough for the 100 million marketing spend envisioned by the legendary director. It's not clear if a studio will pick the film up. So this is what I had to say about this. In other words, this article shows you in detail why Hollywood is in freefall. No risk-taking, no white old dudes that were titans of industry. New Hollywood's extremism has blinded their good sense. But even worse than boycotting talented people because of their genitals, they're also boycotting talented minorities Eddie Murphy wouldn't have even got in the front door of New Hollywood. Don't worry, their paid up social media bot accounts have fixed this by posting, "This is the best movie ever." Now this triggered the very successful movie talker, Film Bob. And this is what he had to say to me. "Bro, what the hell are you talking about? Coppola has been having trouble getting funding since the 80s. And he never found anyone who wanted to release this one in the 20 years he tried to make it. It sucks, but it's hardly a new twist." So clearly everything I said, which was factual, triggered Mr. Bob Chipman, right? The movie Bob. Somehow this person who really has never got a good take in terms of movies came after me. An unknown, unsuccessful, entertainment pundit. Very unsuccessful, barely anybody watches me. We all know that, right? But I clearly triggered him. Truth triggers these people because they're all about hot takes and negativity. But what I wanted to show you before we get into our main subject today is the lack of sophistication, right? So let's just say this is true, that Francis Ford Coppola hasn't got anyone to take on his movies in 20 years, that he's been trying to get this movie done for so many years. There's so many great movies out there where people haven't got them funded, and in the end, someone takes a punt on them and they're successful. We're talking about a pioneer, right, of entertainment, of movies, right? Francis Ford Coppola, who has an interesting, if not risky, idea for a film. He's made the movie, he wants it funded. But New Hollywood think it's too experimental. Well, in the good old days, as I said earlier, experimental movies were taken, these studios took a punt on them. And now it's all about reboots, prequels, relaunches, and the same old shit. Making another version of a pre-existing character or property. But if anyone tries to do something too experimental, right, it's too experimental. And yesterday I heard about David Lynch. He had a good idea for an animated movie series, whatever, tried to sell it to Netflix, and they said no, right? So everything that I said in response to this covers that as well, right? But all Movie Bob had to say was that it sucks. Now, he just said a movie sucked that he hasn't even seen. So this is the lack of sophistication in entertainment discourse today. And it is difficult having an IQ on social media, a high IQ in social media as I have, and an understanding of the industry. He's literally saying that an experimental movie shouldn't be taken a punt on. This guy is very successful. People listen to him. And he's saying an experimental movie is a bad thing because Francis Ford Coppola has been trying to get funding and to get this movie picked up for 20 years. Wow, what a terrible attitude to have. And I haven't checked his content. I'm not sure what kind of films he actually likes. But I think it's absolutely devastating and frightening and to have this kind of attitude from a popular person. How has he become so popular when he doesn't really even like movies? How can anyone say that not taking a punt on an experimental movie is a good thing? New Hollywood try and focus on profits. And the more they focus on profits, the less profits they make. And he's supporting New Hollywood. He didn't like what I said because it was the truth and it triggered him, right? Well, at the end of the day, bro, I've got two brothers and you're not one of them. And at the end of the day, your point isn't valid. I don't mind good discourse, but it sucks is the most offensive thing you can say, right? Because you haven't even seen the movie. I don't know if it sucks or doesn't suck. That's the difference between you and me. I want to give it a chance. I want to give a pioneer of industry, in probably the last movie he'll make, a chance because Megalopolis sounds like a brilliant movie. But oh no, right? Let's not give experimental movies a chance. These are the people you're following. These are the people you're watching. People who don't actually like films. Anyway, let's forget Movie Bob for now. Actually, let's just forget Movie Bob full stop. So the whole idea of today's video is talking about girl bosses. Why are girl boss movies, you know, flopping all over the place? Well, Hollywood, New Hollywood have decided to have girl bosses replace, you know, straight white male leads, which were very successful from the 20s, you know, to really current day, you know, and, you know, men have been very relatable, not just to men, but to women as well. But we've also had great female characters in entertainment. Now, yesterday, I was going through my cabinet just looking at all my DVDs and Blu-rays, and I picked out The Wizard of Oz. So I started watching all the special features, and I was learning a lot of things. I have seen these special features, but I've forgotten about the details of them. And it turns out that in 1939, the two most successful movies, not just of, you know, 1939, but two of the most successful, beloved movies, you know, of all time, starred two girl bosses, not just as characters, but as women within Hollywood. Judy Garland plays Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz in 1939, and Vivien Leigh starred in one of the most successful, iconic, brilliant movies of all time, Gone with the Wind. Two girl bosses in 1939. Imagine the sexism, the view around women in 1939, and two pinnacle actresses playing two brilliant, wonderful characters in two wonderful movies, by the way, both directed mostly by Victor Fleming, one of the great directors of the time. You know how they say today only women should direct women, right? How is that working out for you? By the way, when you look at the girl boss movies of today, more men are going to see them than women. You know, not many girls and women went to support the Marvels. There's a reason for that, because girls don't really relate to the kind of women being represented in entertainment today. So why even today is Vivien Leigh's character in Gone with the Wind and Judy Garland's Dorothy still so relatable? Because they're not playing a representation of Californian spoiled women. which most of the characters are today. If you look at, you know, Margot Robbie as a version of Barbie, right? She's literally representing, you know, Californian women, right? Not you girls out there, not you girls living in council flats, raising children on your own, you know, all the struggles that you face in this real world. They're not representing you, they're representing themselves and their fight, their ongoing fight with a very sexist, criminal, intolerant entertainment industry. So they're not attacking us, generally, but they hate us too, because they hate all men, because men in entertainment haven't treated them very well. So apparently it's every man's fault, and now we're making movies that hate on men. There's no biggest hater of men than the Barbie movie. Barbie's a very popular character. The movie made $1 billion. I didn't think it would be successful, but obviously Greta Gerwig obviously pulled a rabbit out the hat with that movie. If it actually took the money they claimed it did. We're just going to have to take WB's word for that one, aren't we now? But it is interesting, going back to two of the most popular movies starring women of all time, The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. And you know, if you go back in time, if you go back to history, if you go back to the 30s and the 40s of films, many of the greatest films, the black and white films, the older films, the 50s films, even the 60s films, starred women. And successful movies starring women as well. So why did those girl boss movies make so much money? It's not like Vivian, Vivian Leigh Scarlett O'Hara is sitting at home cooking dinner, ironing her husband's socks, right? She's very feisty, she's very independent, Scarlett O'Hara. We're talking about 1939. And we're getting a contemporary woman, an independent woman, right, that doesn't take any shit. Now, she's also playing a bit of a spoilt brat. You know, Scarlett O'Hara doesn't start out, as a very nice person. But within the film, she goes through this brilliant kind of evolution, if you like, and she learns, in a lot of ways to be a better person with all the shit she's going through. She's in this film, the background of this film is the Civil War. But it is an interesting concept, isn't it? To see like modern day New Hollywood try and swap male leads for female leads, right? Because that's how authoritarian that they are, But back then, it was, I suppose, kind of the norm to have a lot of female leads. But to think about those two films back in 1939 starring women, and for those women to be relatable, for those films to be successful, and as I say, to think about the kind of attitudes, those two movies were released during the Depression, just before the Second World War, on the precipice of the potential destruction of the world. And that's interesting. People couldn't have really even afford to go to cinemas, but they did. Now, The Wizard of Oz actually lost a lot of money at the time, but really gained more momentum later on when it was released on television, because people didn't have the money then. And we were just approaching the Second World War. Well, we weren't, but the people then. And what's amazing about The Wizard of Oz, and it's part of its magic, imagine you're living in a depression, you can barely afford to feed your family. You're sitting there, the movie starts in black and white. Then all of a sudden she opens that door after the tornado and it's colour. As an audience member, you are leaving your reality of the depression and going into this colourful fantasy land. And that is what films should be. They should uplift you. They should take you to another world that you'd rather live in for a short time. The movie's about an hour and 40 minutes. And even though you could say it's dated, right? And I mean, when you think of the techniques, I mean, I thought that Superman 78 broke ground with special effects. But this movie, the things they did, I mean, a lot of people got hurt on that movie because they took a lot of risks. I mean, you know, in old Hollywood, even if you go back to the 80s and even the 90s, you know, a lot of people used to get hurt on movies doing stunts, doing these things, even in X-Men, you know, the, what's her name? I forgot the bloody character's name, you know, the blue woman, right? Who was played by, not originally, but in the prequel movies by Jennifer Lawrence, by the other woman, right? The model lady who played her originally, the dye they put on her actually burnt her. And she had to do her scenes and quickly get showered, and sometimes there was no bloody water, and the actual stuff was actually, you know, burning her. And these are the kind of things that Hollywood used to do. It's crazy when if you watch some of these commentaries and you think, shit, you actually put people through this. It's crazy because these directors will go through anything just to get their vision on screen. And, you know, there's the famous story of the Tin Man, the original guy, because they had another guy playing the Tin Man in Wizard of Oz, and they had like silver dust all over him, and he was allergic, he was asthmatic. He nearly fucking died, and they had to replace him. So these are the kind of things you learn when you research movies, and it's very, very interesting. But to me, you know, the problem isn't gal bosses themselves. It isn't female leads themselves, right? If you go back to the late 20th century, really, the only person that's been really, really successful with female leads is James Cameron, because James Cameron is that way inclined. He likes his female leads. So, you know, if you made like gal bosses like James Cameron, you probably would have a lot more successful female-led movies in terms of Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor, in terms of the lead of Alien, Ripley. You know, it's how you execute everything. And I think if the Wizard of Oz was made today, if we never had the Judy Garland Wizard of Oz, the Victor Fleming Wizard of Oz, back then, and we had it today, within 5 minutes, she'd be talking about the patriarchy, Donald Trump, and, you know, putting down males' right, the patriarchy, within 5 minutes. But that's not what you get in the 1939 movie. So you have a strong female character that doesn't, you know, she's a teenager, she's young, she's got an imagination. You know, the whole idea of the Wizard of Oz is the reason she's not safe during that tornado is because she wants to run away and save her dog from the wicked old woman, right? That's the idea of that film. And so it's just about a kid who goes on an adventure because she needs the escape at the right time. Whether or not she's dreaming or she really goes through that, my idea of the Wizard of Oz has always been that she was knocked out during the tornado and she has a dream. But, you know, it's a wonderful adventure for everyone to watch. And then by the end of the movie, you know, she says, there's no place like home. And you know, it's a beautiful little movie, even today. But yeah, so I think the idea is that it's not about whether you have a male lead or a female lead. It's about having talented people. And what's happened today is you've got a bunch of activists that know nothing about making a good film. The motivation isn't about making a good film. It's about the identity of the person. You look at the marketing, you look at the interviews they make, and their marketing is so off-putting. I remember Jennifer Lawrence saying a few years back that she, you know, when she was in those films, or what were they called? I forgot what they were called, right? But based on those books, and she was saying she was the first female lead, right? The first, you know, heroic female lead in movies and shit like that. The shit they say. Of course, she isn't saying whatever she wants. She's, you know, her people, the studio she's working for, are telling her to say that, so she has to say that. It's like what I said about Brie Larson in that press conference prior to the release of Captain Marvel. That shit she said against men, that was written down by Disney. They wanted her to say it, right? And Brie Larson has been bullied and attacked ever since. But it weren't down to her. This is who Disney are now, right? This is what entertainment is today. So they're not representing women right, because there's this whole thing about representing women, representing minorities. A film shouldn't be about representation. A film should be about a good, solid pitch, a good, solid story, and a great execution of that story. And no matter who's starring in it, as long as they deserve to be there, it should be enjoyable for the audience. But that's not what they do today. So 1939, I'm sure, had a lot of problematic views and a lot of problematic treatment of people. But, you know, we're talking about more naive, more innocent times, certainly in cinema. And, you know, when we talk about, on the top of the show, we were talking about experimental movies. And Movie Bob saying that that's a bad thing because, you know, no one's wanted to fund, you know, Francis Ford Coppola's experimental movies because they don't fund experimental movies anymore. I get the impression the only reason Peter Jackson was able to make The Lord of the Rings is because they were The Lord of the Rings. If he came up with an experimental movie with an original story, he probably wouldn't have been greenlit by New Line Cinema and WB because they look for safe bets. But there's no safe bets anymore. People are so tired of prequels and sequels and reboots and relaunches. We were talking about Quantum Leap being cancelled after 2 seasons, the revival, the other day. And why that show didn't work, because they had to tick every box going. And they made the main leap a subplot. That was never going to work right. So you've got the wrong people, right? You've got all these people. You've got check boxes working in entertainment. You've got activists working in entertainment. You haven't got people, excuse me, that know what they're doing, who understand the industry they're working in, right? So people, the people probably in marketing are probably activists, right? When they were promoting Captain Marvel, they had this term, hero. You know, it's insane. It's cringy. It puts people's backs up. And it's making a transparent point. Oh my God, hero. Imagine now if they were marketing Terminator, Terminator 2, one of the first 2 Aliens movies, hero. They're fucking insane. And, you know, people like Movie Bob don't like to hear this because they think they're in the bestest movie era ever. And they think these people making movies are the best filmmakers. Don't tell me, Movie Bob, no disrespect to James Gunn, because I respect him as a good, capable writer-director, but you probably think James Gunn is a better filmmaker and more iconic and more legendary than Francis Ford Coppola. It wouldn't surprise me at all. As I say, these are people talking about movies that absolutely have no love or no idea about entertainment because they're fighting for the wrong things. And I've watched a lot of television, I've watched a lot of cinema, and, you know, I've spoken, thanks to my father, I've been around, you know, the industry at its heart, and I get it. And, you know, there's 2 different mentalities compared to old Hollywood and new Hollywood. And new Hollywood isn't about telling a good story. It isn't about making a great movie. It's not about greenlighting an experimental picture. It's about doing something safe. It's about making sure everyone's represented. It's about people seeing themselves on the screen. And that, straight away, takes the magic. I don't want to see myself on the screen. Kids don't want to see themselves on the screen. What they want to see is someone that they can wish they was. They can wish that, you know, boys and girls wish they were Dorothy, you know, walking along the yellow brick road, singing along with the Tin Man, the Lion, the Cowardly Lion, etc. You know, it's wish fulfillment. And I've spoken about this before on my platform as well. That's what's been taken away from entertainment. Wish fulfillment. It's the reason they used to cast attractive people in starring roles because you wish you were them. And for a couple of hours watching a movie, you wish you was. But now they're like putting real people in front of the camera. Why do I want to wish I was that person? I'm already that dowdy, ugly old geezer, right? But if I watch a Tom Cruise movie, I can pretend I'm Tom Cruise. I can pretend I'm Maverick. I can imagine I'm Maverick. That's the magic of movies. That's why Top Gun Maverick made a lot of money. But what these activists have done, what these lunatics have done, have taken away wish fulfillment away from movies, right? I used to watch a little show called Alias, starring a woman, Jennifer Garner, playing a woman, obviously. And, you know, that's obvious back then. It's not obvious today, right? But I kind of imagined being her. I imagined being her friend. And this is an ordinary young woman who finds out, you know, that her whole life is a lie and she's been trained to be a spy. It's all about wish fulfillment, right? Good storytelling. We don't have that anymore because their priorities are everything else. So I say this all the time. New Hollywood have no idea to write women because they believe, they talk about bad stereotypes, but they're the ones who stereotype minorities and, you know, stereotype women. They stereotype minorities as victims and white people, normally white dudes, as the aggressors, right? It's all stereotypes. Not every woman is the same. Not every woman has the mentality of LA, Californian, spoiled, bratty women, right? You know, you're not representing real women. In the Marvels, those three girls, those three women are not representing everyday women. And you don't even wish you were them, right? You don't wish you were them. Girls and boys wish they were Marty McFly in that DeLorean, right? And there's a little bit of them in that movie because he's a young kid. So there's that, right? And you put yourself in that kid's place, and I get that, but today we wouldn't get Marty McFly. Thank God Zemeckis and Spielberg won't allow that movie to be rebooted when they're dead. God fuck knows what they'll do with it. We'll probably get Martine McFly, right? Another girl boss, right? And that's the point. They're trying to replace men with women. But then, okay, do that. Do that if you're saying, well, you know, men have dominated the industry for far too long. It's the girls' turn now. It's the minorities' turn. Then at least get the most talented people, you know, who happen to be minorities, who happen to be girls, to be in these movies, to make these movies, but they're not doing it. It's a rarity. You know, where are the other Greta Garwigs? Why are they not getting in? Because Greta Garwig has entertainment DNA, so she's been allowed to come in the door. But if you're a talented minority, you have to pass the DNA test, and that's the problem. So they don't know how to write girls and women. They don't want to know how to write girls and women. They've got one perception. But in 1939, which must have been a very sexist, male-dominated society, we had two movies starring two females, two girl bosses, and people related to those women, both men and women, and they were interesting characters. They were interesting, pioneering people and movies. And, you know, if we talk about experimental movies, there's nothing more experimental than The Wizard of Oz. Movie Bob talks about movies that were being rejected for years. Well, they were trying to make a Wizard of Oz movie for years. But in the end, they did it, and it worked because they kept on persevering. But it was a very, very different time. But to think that we had two female-led movies in 1939 in a male-dominated society, in a male-dominated industry, in an industry probably that didn't have a lot of respect for women, right? But we got it. We got two female leads, which were brilliant. Two of the best actresses or actors in general in the industry at the time. And they said, yeah, these movies, the books star girls, so we're not going to change that. Today, they're taking stories starring men and swapping them for women and minorities, and that's the difference. We are living in a very politicised entertainment industry, and they've sunk their industry because of their political ideology.